Forensics. This is probably a great deal of interest for a lot of people that have to respond to issues within their organizations. So give him a nice Hawaiian welcome.
Okay, thank you. This is actually going to be a little bit different than some of the other talks that you've attended here at this great event. We're not going to talk about any kind of protection. We're not going to talk about any kind of malware or really any kind of security for all practical purposes. However, we're going to teach you how to stalk people on social media. So for fun and profit, that is. And again, my name is Brian Lockrey. I'm with an organization called the IADFI, which is a collection of people that do digital forensics investigation. A lot of us work with or for law enforcement. And one of the things that we do is we take a number of the open source software products that are out there and use them in conjunction with other packages that are either commercially or open source available. So if anybody wants to contact me, I apologize for the lightness of the screen. I'm actually using an iPad here for my presentation, which is the first time that I've ever done this on an iPad. So one time I was doing a presentation like this, and I was using my laptop, and I was logged in as a guest, and all of a sudden Norton Utilities comes up on the screen and starts doing a virus scan across the whole system. So anyways, technology is going to roll. There's always going to be something that'll come bite you. So why are we interested in social media forensics? Well, a whole number of reasons. One, as I mentioned earlier, criminal reasons. We use it to track bad people, find relationships between bad people, good people, other people. We've used it to track people that are sharing links to illegal content or illicit content. We've used it to find missing persons or to track down, hunt down missing persons or get clues to where missing people might be. I've done a number of private practice, done a number of infidelity cases. So if anybody in here is, I know we have a few people that are private investigators that probably will be very interested in this. The social media now is for all intents and purposes, a big dating site, so to speak. So unfortunately, some of the significant others already have significant others. So and we'll talk a little bit about that later. It's also good for malware diagnostics or malware analysis, I should say. If your place of business becomes infected or your organization becomes infected, you may well find that tracing everything back, that somebody clicked on some link that was sent to them through a LinkedIn direct message or Twitter direct message or whatever. So it does come into play for malware as well for some of my friends here that do malware analysis. All kinds of other things like scams or fraud or human trafficking. We're starting to see quite a bit of that. There's actually pretty extensive prostitution rings that go on in social networks, and the proprietors of those services just like to identify people like you and me that happen to be in Honolulu. And I'm not picking on Honolulu, I'm just using that as an example. Because a lot of us will go out there and tweet things like, we're going to check in that we're in this hotel in Honolulu. And I did it, I did it myself. And so that can become an invitation for the purveyors of such services to contact you one way or the other. As I mentioned earlier, child pornography. I've worked a number of cases, both sides of the bench, both for prosecution as well as for defense. I don't work for law enforcement, but I do create software that's used by law enforcement. Illegal media sharing. We're now seeing many cases where obviously people are sharing music, people are sharing videos, things like that through the internet. We're also seeing, believe it or not, in apartment complexes that the internet service providers that are, providing a wholesale service to like an apartment complex, especially within a major university area, are actually allowing probes to be put on their network to watch people that are downloading illegal media, because there's a royalty involved, there's a ransom involved. If they turn you in, they get money from the RIAA or whatever organizations deal with that. Okay. First thing we're going to talk about is Twitter. I have to caveat here. I know there's some people here that actually work for Twitter. There's some people here that work for Microsoft. I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just addressing social media in general. And Twitter is one of our favorites. Some interesting statistics. I can't validate this. I stole this off the internet like everything else. So it was somebody's infograph, and if it came off the internet, it's got to be true. So anyways, some statistics. I'm sure this is a few years old, this slide, so I'm sure these numbers have probably grown exponentially here in the last year or two. But on a busy day, Twitter sees about 175 million tweets. Twitter gets about 300,000 new visitors daily. 62% of the Twitter users are in the age group of 18 to 34. And then there's me. And then every second, 750 tweets are being shared. I think during some of the campaign seasons and major sporting events and car races and horse races and things like that, you'll see that number go up even more substantially. Twitter has 140 million active users and sees 300 million tweets per day, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so at any rate, I did have one person that challenged these statistics, because I think if you do the math, they don't add up, but we're not here to teach math. So at any rate, one thing I find interesting is the bottom statistic there. The average Twitter user has 27 followers. Well, if you've only got 27 followers on Twitter, you're probably not really a user. Now, probably what distorts that statistic is you got some people that have 5,000 followers. I have 18,000 followers. And then you have some people that have 2 followers because they log on, they tweet for a week, and then they never come back. So that may well distort those statistics as well. Okay, so where do we start? Well, a couple links we can take a look at. Again, I apologize for the color scheme here. It doesn't do this on my desktop, but the couple of URLs you could look at. First one is an HTTPS for Barack Obama. Second one is an HTTP for Michelle Obama. And I think Twitter will actually convert that second one to an SSL link if you leave the S out. So I think it still becomes a secure transport. But what you want to, probably the first thing you want to do if you're at all interested in this subject is get on a regular desktop. Don't do this on a mobile device, but get on a regular desktop browser like Chrome or Firefox or IE, and then view the source, because you're going to see all kinds of magic numbers that show up throughout that HTML stream where and some of those numbers will become significant as we do our investigations moving forward. Okay. Some of the associated properties, if you will, that can go along with Twitter tweets. There's a website called TwitPics. Twitter now has its own internal photo sharing site as well. And here we're interested, of course, in what photos are being posted with these tweets. And there's, I don't know if you can see it real well, but and these slides will be on the website. But you can do a search for various TwitPics that show up in your stream. There are basically a whole number of different photo sharing sites that either directly or indirectly can be interfaced with Twitter. So the reason why I'm pointing this out is because if you're doing any kind of an investigation, you need to you need to get a pretty good handle on what everybody's using, where they're all at, and as well as the syntax of the URLs that are used to access those photos and what other artifacts you can get from those URLs. YFrog is another one. It used to be that Instagram had a real nice coupling with Twitter. That relationship, I think, has kind of waned away with Facebook buying Instagram, and now Facebook has their own Instagram quick video service, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Anyways, on the bottom of this screen here, you'll see a little bit more of a cryptic looking URL for an instance of a photo on Instagram. So if you were to take that hash code there, that ultimately will land on some photo. So if you're reverse engineering a Twitter stream, for example, you may see a link to a t.co / some hash code, which then gets translated again into a link that might look more like this link here, depending on where the end destination is. So in the entire evidence trail, you want to keep track of all these URLs, even while they're being translated from one platform to another, because there's some significant reasons that we'll come back to. Some other sites that you can share photos on, Oily is one, SmugMug, Posterius, Mobile Picture, Flickr, TwitGoo, TwitterPix. Like I said, there's hundreds of them. So these are just some of the more common ones that we see and that we have built into our software to automatically traverse as we go through them. Oops, I think that just went backwards. Okay, this slides are actually, I had to submit these several months ago, but Twitter also now has a video network called Vine.co. How many people have used Vine.co? That's not COM, don't be confused with COM, but Vine.co is, and I'm not sure of the business relationship. I think it was started by a couple of people that actually were some of the founders of Twitter, and somehow there's some business relationship between Twitter and Vine.co, but I'm not sure what that is. But anyways, it's the 10 to 15 second instant video service that Twitter has. And as I mentioned, Instagram now has that. They just came out with that about, 2 weeks ago, I think. Came out with their own quick video, 15-second video sharing kind of service, which adds a whole nother block to the things that we have to decode when we're doing any kind of an investigation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Mobile apps are becoming very significant in the digital forensics world. A few years ago, all we saw was desktops with umpteen different browsers, and now we're seeing many different flavors of phones with literally thousands of different applications, many of which have some kind of API interface into a social network. And as some of the earlier presenters presented, some of those apps may have access to things like your friends list, your GPS locations, your contact list, your Twitter username, your Facebook username, things like that. So definitely we want to keep an eye on any of the mobile apps. Okay, it used to be with Twitter that you could get an RSS feed of a user's timeline. So if you were stalking a user on Twitter or investigating them, you could issue a call to the, not really the API, but to the system status routines within Twitter. Oh, it is an API call that would return these RSS streams. This, I think, is a declining feature that may actually maybe not work anymore, depending on how you're using it. Is that when it died? About 2 weeks ago, yeah. And that's about the same time they did the OAuth conversion, isn't it? Yeah. And remind me of that later because we're going to talk about that. So the bottom line is what we're talking about here is that if you're writing any kind of custom applications that are out there monitoring people, you know, things move, things change. Twitter changes things like their APIs, their OAuth identification systems and things like that. So, you know, you may find yourself updating your apps more often than you care to. However, there are other ways to do it. There are other ways to get people's feeds that may not come in as RSS, but there are other ways to get them. Okay, what is significant here is that on Twitter, every user has a unique number. And if you take a look at Michelle Obama and you do a view source code, she has a unique number which, yeah, there it is right there. It's 409-486-555. Okay, because the reason you want to know that number is because for some of the API calls and some of the friends lists and different things you look at, there are times when you want to index using that number, and there are times when you want to index using the screen name. Now, what's also significant here is that if she changes her screen name, so say she changes her screen name to Mrs. Obama, for example, her ID number remains the same, okay? So again, if you're stalking somebody and you really want to keep tabs on them, then you want to do your queries based on that ID number rather than their name, because if their name changes, you won't find them anymore in your lookups. But the number will remain the same. Okay. Now, of course, if she deletes her account and creates a new account with Mrs. Obama, then by all means, she's going to have a brand new ID number. Okay, there are also a lot, I mean like hundreds of third-party social media directory sites out there. For example, there's a site called Topsy.com. Does anybody use Topsy? Okay. What Topsy does is it kind of keeps track of somebody's most relevant tweets, for example. And so if Twitter doesn't allow you to go out there and do, you know, thousands of probes per hour because they have rate limits, you can get a lot of the same information by going out and visiting some of these other sites. For example, Topsy is one. Twello is another site, which I think Twello may have died a few months ago. And that's another challenge, is that some of these sites don't last forever. Some of the social media sites don't last forever. Okay? TW Birthday is a site that, no, it doesn't tell you their birthday. It tells you the day that they first started using Twitter. So if you're going to try to build a timeline back over their entire existence on Twitter so you can see who they've had communications, conversations with, things like that, it gives you, at least it gives you a starting point. Okay. There's another one, I don't know if you can see this, called TwitBiz Cards. There's another one called Amplicate. There's another one called TweetReach, blah, blah, blah. So the reason I'm telling you this is because you can often gain a lot of information like, well, you know, for example, if I was to query based on a string like infosec or something, for example, I might see, you know, a lot of people that have been tweeting about using the hashtag infosec and who those people are and who the relevant people are, things like that. So you can glean some information from that. Okay, Facebook will be the next one we pick on. Oops. I'm sure pretty much everybody here has pretty much seen Facebook in one form or another, or is on Facebook. Facebook contains a lot of profile information, so you can put as little or as much or as many as you want out there. Facebook is good for drilling into where are people hanging out, like what are their locations, who who are their friends that they're interfacing with, or what locations are they in. Now granted, you're going to have family members that live in Alaska, or you're going to have family members that are in the military or whatever. So, not everybody's going to be in your neighborhood. The other thing that people like to do on Facebook is post lots of photos. Okay, so using a little bit of collection, cataloging of some various photos that people are posting on Facebook, we can do some interesting things with facial recognition to see who are some of the people they're hanging out with. And Facebook has some of that capability already built in. If somebody's already tagged in a photo, you may, as you move your cursor across that photo on the display, you'll see that this is Aunt Martha and this is Cousin Susie. I mean, you'll see all that information if those tags have been set up correctly. Now, don't believe it. Okay, even though it's the internet, you can't believe that truly is Aunt Martha or that that's Susie, because you have to kind of take those tags out of context, if you will. Okay, the other thing that we have on Facebook is obviously text and links. People can post links to things like their favorite charities or favorite YouTube videos, or now the Instagram videos, or really just about anything. Facebook will let you post links to just about anything. I think they do a little bit of checking on how valid and how safe that link is, but for the most part, they'll let you through. And the other thing that's significant is check-ins. So again, if you're checking into the high-rise hotel in Honolulu, just keep in the back of your mind that you just revealed the GPS locations of where you're physically at, okay? And that's certainly what's going to be important to us. Friends, close friends, family, acquaintances, people you work with. Facebook gives you a little bit more granularity in identifying who some of these people are that somebody's associated with, okay? Now, everybody's going to jump up and say, well, there's privacy and there's protection and there's all that kind of stuff. Well, yeah, there is, but it's also a moving target, and there's also ways around it. So again, just based on different apps that people may have, different pages, different groups, different interests, different things that they post messages about on their Facebook timeline, you can get a pretty good idea of who somebody's connected with in one form or another, be it through their job or through, school or job or convention or whatever they're doing. Okay? There was a rumor probably about a year ago that Facebook was going to launch a dating site or a dating service that was going to be built on Facebook. Hopefully there's nobody from Facebook here. And I think, again, that was a rumor that came out when Facebook first went public, and all the stock market people are saying, well, they got to start making money, blah, blah, blah. But if you think about it, all the information's already there, right? I mean, I spend a lot of time on dating sites, not that I'm looking for a date, but because I do investigation work. And it's the same information. I mean, where did you go to high school? Where did you go to college? When were you first married? When were you second married? When was your third marriage? All this kind of stuff. And, a lot of that same information can basically be extracted out of somebody's Facebook profile, depending on how much they posted. Okay. Okay, now, if you're doing any kind of software development, I'm going to give you some magic buzzwords here that you want to write down. One of the things that you want to look at is what's called the Facebook graph search. Has anybody used Facebook graph search? Okay, it's an opt-in thing, and I'll show you how to opt into it a little bit later. Facebook likes to use the word graph all over the place. So they have what's called the open graph. They have what's called the graph API. They have graph search, blah, blah, blah. Well, graph search is actually pretty interesting because you can type things in like, you know, show me all these single women that live near Purdue University. And you get a nice list of them, okay? Even though they're not your friends, or they're not on your timeline, or you have no association with them, okay? Now, I typed in, show me all the beautiful women, single beautiful women that live near Purdue University that have lots of money. I didn't get anybody, so anyways, you know, you get what you pay for. But anyways, if you want to learn more about it, I highly suggest if you're into any kind of social media investigation that you take a look at it. It's an opt-in, opt-out service. So what you have to do is go to this page here, and you request to be given that ability. And then a week or 2 weeks later, Facebook will send you some message that say, you know, welcome to the elite club of Facebook. You're now allowed to do these kinds of searches. And down here on the bottom is a complete article that Yahoo News did about the Facebook graph search capability. So anyways, here's what you'll get. You'll get, you know, graph searches here. If you want to use it, you know, you click on this button. I apologize for the granularity here, but this is an iPad. And, you know, turn on graph search, blah, blah, blah. And then, like I said, within a few days or a week or month or whatever, you'll get a message that says that you've been granted access to the Facebook graph search. So some of the things you can do, you know, you can search through your friends, my friends, search through pictures of your friends, and, you know, just different things, locations your friends have been to, blah, blah, blah. Now, keep in mind, you can search for people that aren't even your friends. That's one of the interesting things about the Facebook graph search. Okay, so that you can search for photos of anything that might interest me. Well, there are lots of things that interest me, right? So you can search for that. So, and again, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but you can do a lot of very granular kind of zooming if you turn that facility on. Also keep in mind that it's Facebook. So, you know, the fact that it works that way today, by the time you get home tonight, it's liable to change, right? So, you know, don't call me up and complain if it doesn't work that way tonight. Okay, another thing we need to worry about Facebook certainly is any Facebook apps, the security concerns. Some great talks earlier about, you know, security of apps that you put on your iPhone or your Android phone. Well, you got the same thing here. You know, apps that you install on Facebook, you have security concerns about, you know, can they access everybody on your timeline? Can they post things to your wall at any time without your permission? Can they invite your friends to invite their friends to join you on this application? So, you know, again, read the terms of service and just be aware that some of these applications might come back to haunt you. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about applications later, so that's kind of why I'm pointing this out right now. Okay. Now, the other thing that, of course, as I mentioned earlier, that security is kind of a moving target. You know, we see it act differently based on different changes. You know, it used to be that if you unfriended somebody, that they may no longer be able to see any of your comments or your wall or your timeline or anything else. Well, that isn't necessarily true anymore. I've gone through a number of different scenarios where or somebody has unfriended me or I've unfriended somebody, whatever, and you may still be able to see a lot of their content. Okay, one of the things that you have to be a little bit careful of, and I've seen this happen on Facebook and LinkedIn as well, and it could really happen on any social network. It could happen on Skype, or it could happen on, you know, really any social network, is what we call cloning. okay? And that is, I pick somebody at random, just pick somebody at random, and I go out there and I clone your account. And I take your pictures off your account and I create a whole new account that looks just like you. Now let's take LinkedIn, for example, since we haven't talked much about LinkedIn yet. I could clone this account for somebody else, have all the same information out there that you've already made publicly available on your LinkedIn account, and then come back, a week later and say, hey, I remember I met you at the, Shaka Khan in Honolulu, and we talked about, security things, and here's this cool program I think you should install to monitor your Windows registry and give you an alarm every time something nasty gets changed in your Windows registry, right? Well, what are you going to do? You're going to believe them, right? I mean, this is like a friend. I mean, this is somebody I met, some cool guy. And so we're seeing this happen where these cloned accounts are, getting you to follow them because you think you know the person, and then a week or two later they say, hey, you really need to install this app on Facebook, or you really need to click on this link and install this plugin for Chrome, or you need to install this app on your iPhone or whatever, okay? So anyways, just keep that in mind. Just because somebody looks like there's somebody legitimate on a social network, they may not be. Okay. And of course, they could just send you a direct message or whatever and say, hey, click on this link here. It's got, cool stuff on it, and it becomes an infected link. Okay, so now we'll talk a little more about LinkedIn. Let's see how we're doing on time here. Okay, LinkedIn user profiles. Again, it's really no different than any other social network. It all maps down to some internal number. So even if you have a vanity URL on LinkedIn, like /joe.smith or whatever your vanity URL might be, it still ultimately behind the scenes will map into this number. And of course, the other reason we like numbers is in investigation world is because there's lots of Joe Smiths out there, right? There's lots of Lisa Smiths out there. So, you can't just go on LinkedIn and search for Joe Smith and find the person you're looking for. But once you've homed in on that number, now you can start tracking down who are their friends and who are their people they've worked with, what are the groups they belong to, things like that. The other nice thing about LinkedIn is it gives you information about company profiles. So I have a pretty good indication that I'm tracking the right person if I know some previous information about that person, like, they used to work for IBM in Boca Raton. Okay, well, that's great. That's probably the right Joe Smith. The other thing that you can use is you can say, well, LinkedIn groups. This person is a software developer. Well, they belong to the Python group on LinkedIn. Well, that's good. That sort of makes them look like they might be a software development person. Okay. There's also an advanced search, so you could say, well, show me all the Python developers in Boca Raton, because I know he's got some friend whose first name is Fred, and I want to see who all the Freds are that use Python that maybe work at IBM in Boca Raton. Okay. So there's a whole number of search parameters that you can use to do some serious zooming in on LinkedIn. And if you really want to be serious about this, you can get a premium account on LinkedIn where you can do searches into people that aren't even friends of friends of friends. And if you pay LinkedIn enough money, you can do as many of those searches as you want per month. Okay, another one that we use pretty heavily is Meetup. Anybody use Meetup here? I know a lot of the OWASP groups and stuff are on Meetup. Meetup's a great little site. It's also group-based. So if I want to find all the chess players in Indianapolis, Indiana, that belong to the meetup group, I can certainly come up with a whole list of them. I can, for example, if I go to meetup.com/indie-tweetups, it'll show me all the different tweetups or meetups within the Indianapolis area. Within Meetup, they have a profile. That profile often has a picture. It'll often have links to other social networking sites. Okay? It's one of the things I didn't point out earlier is that often you can visit a social media profile like Facebook or Google Plus is good at this. Google Plus has a built-in mechanism where you can put your Twitter ID, your LinkedIn ID, your Facebook page, your blog, your website. So you can immediately, if you can get to their Google Plus profile, you can often fan out into, well, this person's hanging out on Twitter over here, they're hanging out on LinkedIn over here, blah, blah, blah. So you can explode that into a matrix and then cross that matrix with all their friends and then build a pretty good profile that way. Same thing with Meetup. Meetup will let you message somebody through Facebook or post a tweet to Twitter, that kind of thing. So you have some crisscross, link sharing going on between the other social networks there. The other thing that Meetup is good for is that it lets you do photo uploads. So if you're having a big, euchre party in Toledo, Ohio, you can upload photos of you and everybody else playing euchre. And sometimes those photos will help you figure out, well, who all was at this, this particular meetup party. Relationships on Meetup work a little bit different than some of the other social networks. You typically, both members have to be sort of members of the same Meetup group before they can see each other's profile. Okay. One of the things I find real interesting about Meetup is they actually use Tumblr for their blogs. Tumblr is a whole nother social network that younger high school kids are now hanging out and leaving Facebook and moving to Tumblr in a big wave. And if you've seen any of the recent news about Tumblr, there's a lot of, I won't say illicit, but pretty close to it kind of photos out there on Tumblr. Okay. And so here's an example of this guy happens to be a friend of mine, but he's on LinkedIn, and notice how he has built right into his LinkedIn account a link to his Facebook, his Twitter, his LinkedIn, his Tumblr, I'm sorry, this is off of Meetup, I'm sorry. He has links into those sites directly. So really, once I find this page, I've got links to all of his other social media things. Okay. Some of the other sites we sometimes take a look at, Foursquare. Anybody use Foursquare or Gowalla? Okay. Foursquare and Gowalla used to be a little bit more popular before Facebook added the check-in button. But that's basically the same thing. It allows you to check into a location like a McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever. You get, every time you check in, of course, there's a record. And if you've checked in more times than anybody else, you become the mayor of that location. What's interesting in a forensics world is that location is a location. So it has GPS coordinates associated with it that we can use for forensics information, forensics artifacts. Okay. The other thing that's interesting about Foursquare is you can get badges, same thing as Gowalla. So if you visit places many times or whatever, then you start winning these badges, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Both Foursquare and Gowalla well, really all the networks we've talked about up to this point have mobile applications for Android, iPhone, iPad. So a lot of these pictures, for example, if we want to know who this guy, well, we know who this guy is, but if we didn't know who this guy was, or we want to know who some of these people are, and we're doing a forensics investigation on an iPhone, for example, right? We can take these photos and hunt them down, either by hash coding them or by looking at the file names of the actual profile images themselves, or in some cases we'll actually use photo recognition to figure out who these people are. Okay. Now, oftentimes in a forensics investigation, there may be, these links may still be around, but sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. It just all depends what you're doing. So again, this would be the Foursquare app. You can see that, you know, this person hangs out at this location over here, or has been there at least once. And here's some of the badges. So if you're doing a forensics investigation on a phone, you might see some of these little icons laying around here and there. Well, that's pretty much a clue that that person's using Foursquare or has used Foursquare at some point. Okay, Koala's another Foursquare kind of an app, both desktop and mobile. Again, you have friends, you have pictures, blah, blah, blah. Where were we at? What did we do? You have badges, just like you do on Foursquare. But look at this down here. See that arrow? Okay. This person is currently near this address right here. So you can almost in real time zoom in to where somebody's at based on this person's near this address. Well, this address becomes a GPS location, right? And you can home in. So one of my favorite stories is a investigation that was done, I believe it was in Ohio, where somebody was wanted on an identity theft charge. And somebody's laughing, somebody must already know this story. They were wanted on an identity theft charge, and the police were getting ready to go in and make the bust. And this person actually posted a photograph of a steak dinner at a real, you know, top-notch steakhouse. It wasn't Ruth Chris, but I mean it was a steakhouse like a Ruth Chris kind of a steakhouse. Well, it's real-time data, right? He posted this picture. The police knew exactly where he was at and that he was there right at that time, and they were able to walk into the steakhouse and bust him right there on the spot. Okay? So bottom line is, if you're going to be a criminal, don't use any real-time social networking stuff because it'll come back to haunt you. Okay? So again, you can get you can zoom in on a person, figure out, well, here's all the different nearby spots, so there's a good chance they might be at one of them. Okay. Yelp, I do a tremendous amount of traveling, so Yelp's one of my favorite sites because I get tips on where to eat and where not to eat, things like that. Although sometimes people lie, but that's okay. It is the internet, so you can't believe everything you see. But again, you know, you have all the same information. We know this person's been here. We know when they were there. We got an address. That address turns into GPS location. That visitation turns into a timestamp location, or timestamp for our timeline if we're trying to build a timeline for somebody, like where they've been, where they were at, et cetera. Okay? Again, you have, well, these are recipes here. They're not pictures that we would do any kind of recognition with. Okay, but you get my point. So you can see, okay, well, here's different people that were at this restaurant. You can actually get the Google map. So again, from that map, you can get the GPS locations, either directly or indirectly, if you need to home in on that as well. The Cats and Dogs Animal Hospital, you have a physical address here. Now, one of the earlier talks, the speaker did a example of a situation where you could actually send out a message that looked like the GPS location's out in the middle of the ocean somewhere. So, you can't always believe that that's really where the person was. But most of these sites, like on Yelp and Meetup and things, are authenticated. I mean, they figured out that this place is really where it's at. Same thing with what's on, Google Maps and stuff. That doesn't mean that, there isn't errors or whatever. Has anybody ever used Google Images to find a person? Okay, we got a few takers there. Normally I demo this, but since I'm using an iPad, I can't do that. What you do is if you, go to my Twitter page, for example, I'll give you my URL. If you take my picture off my Twitter page, my profile picture, and you save it to your hard disk, and you go on images.google.com, and you click on this camera right here. Now, if you have a camera built into your computer, you can take your own picture. But you can also upload a file to images.google.com, and it will come back and show you two things. One, it shows you people that look similar to me. However, that doesn't work very good. But it will also show you any website, Google listing kind of thing, that has anything that looks similar to that photo on it, okay? So if you took me and you did me as an example, which I usually do, but I can't do it right now, you will find my LinkedIn page, you will find my Facebook page, you will find some blog articles about, me talking at different talks and different things, and it's really pretty amazing what it comes up with. Now, you do get some false hits. I mean, it'll come up with, this person looks like him, but it's not really me. So again, you get the, and here's where you would choose a file from your computer, just upload it to Google, and let them find it. Now, if you happen to land on this page right here, I highly suggest that you don't enter your account number down there, because that's not where we want to be. So anyways, why are we doing this stuff? Well, because it's a wide open arena for people to share information. We're not Prism. We're not collecting information that is meant to be private. Most of this information we're using is wide open and publicly shared and publicly available. So, it's good to know this for your own protection, for the protection of your kids or your children or whatever it is you do. So, unless there's any questions, there's a couple websites for you guys that are interested in information security. I took my Google Reader OPML file, or whatever you call those things, which used to monitor about 3,000 InfoSec blogs, and I turned it into a Twitter robot that actually, every time somebody updates their blog, will post a message out on this automated feed right here. So you can get a lot of cool links if you just follow this on Twitter. And the other one that's not on here is @One Data Recovery, the number one data recovery, which is my picture, if you want to take my picture to find all my other URL websites. Does anybody have any questions? I can't really see some of the back of the room there. So, at any rate, thank you very much, and thank you for sticking around. So.
Thanks, Brian. Here's your, I got to unbutton this. Okay, let's get Paul.
App, you can get the GPS locations, either directly or indirectly, if you need to home in on that as well. The Cats and Dogs Animal Hospital, you have a physical address here. Now, one of the earlier talks, the speaker did did a example of a situation where you could actually send out a message that looked like, you know, the GPS location's out in the middle of the ocean somewhere. So, you know, you can't always believe that that's really where the person was. But most of these, you know, most of these sites, like on Yelp and Meetup and things, are authenticated. I mean, they figured out that this place is really where it's at. Same thing with what's on, you know, Google Maps and stuff. That doesn't mean that, you know, there isn't errors or whatever. Has anybody ever used Google Images to find a person? Okay, we got a few takers there. Normally I demo this, but since I'm using an iPad, I can't do that. What you do is if you know, go to my Twitter page, for example, I'll give you my URL. If you take my picture off my Twitter page, my profile picture, and you save it to your hard disk, and you go on images.google.com, and you click on this camera right here. Now, if you have a camera built into your computer, you can take your own picture. But you can also upload a file to images.google.com, and it will come back and show you two things. One, it shows you people that look similar to me. However, that doesn't work very good. But it will also show you any website, Google listing kind of thing, that has anything that looks similar to that photo on it, okay? So if you took me and you did me as an example, which I usually do, but I can't do it right now, you will find my LinkedIn page, you will find my Facebook page, you will find some blog articles about, you know, me talking at different talks and different things, and it's really pretty amazing what it comes up with. Now you do get some false hits. I mean, it'll come up with, you know, this person looks like him, but it's not really me. So again, you get the, and here's where you would choose a file from your computer, just upload it to Google, and let them find it. Now, if you happen to land on this page right here, I highly suggest that you don't enter your account number down there, because that's not where we want to be. So anyways, why are we doing this stuff? Well, because it's a wide open arena for people to share information. We're not, you know, we're not Prism. We're not collecting information that is meant to be private. Most of this information we're using is wide open and publicly shared and publicly available. So, you know, it's good to know this for your own protection, for the protection of your kids or your children or whatever it is you do. So, unless there's any questions, there's a couple websites for you guys that are interested in information security. I took my Google Reader OPML file, or whatever you call those things, which used to monitor about 3,000 InfoSec blogs, and I turned it into a Twitter robot that actually, every time somebody updates their blog, will post a message out on this automated feed right here. So you can get a lot of cool links if you just follow this on Twitter. And the other one that's not on here is @OneDataRecovery, the number one data recovery, which is my picture, if you want to take my picture to find all my other URL websites. Does anybody have any questions? I can't really see some of the back of the room there. So, at any rate, thank you very much, and thank you for sticking around. So.
Thanks, Brian. Here's your, well, I got to unbutton this. Okay, let's get Paul